Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Friday Ramblings. I am your host, and it is still March, so we are still going green. And more importantly, we are feeling the St. Patrick's vibe. That's right, it's time for all things Irish, or in this case, Celtic, because we are discussing a book by one of my favorite authors of all time, Raymond E. Feist. We are talking about Booyah! Faerie Tale. Look at that. Look at that name. Look at that title. Look at that cool wicked art. This is a one-shot novel, unlike the majority of Raymond E. Feist's work, which is set in the fantasy realm of Midkemia, although he has recently started a new fantasy series, having brought the Midkemia saga to a conclusion, which I've talked about in a previous video, Midkemia Memories. Feel free to watch that after this video if you just want to hear me go on endlessly about my fanboying for Mr. Feist. However, the key point for now is that Faerie Tale, as I said, is a one-shot novel. So you can read it, and you're gone. You're done. Good times. Don't have to worry about tracking down sequels and getting heavily invested in something that will occupy your time for weeks or months, depending on how quickly you read. So what's this got to do with our salute to all things green and of the land of Ire? Well, Faerie Tale is, as we see in that title there, a modern masterpiece of dark fantasy. Specifically, dark fantasy utilizing Celtic mythology as its base. Specifically, the stories of the fairy. Notice the book title uses the old world spelling of fairy as opposed to our modern F-A-I-R-Y. This has the E and the I-E at the end because this is all about the original stories that came out of Ireland. So, let's break it down with minimal spoilers, because I do want to give you just enough to make you interested in the book without saying so much you don't feel like you need to read the book. Gotta walk that thin line. Walk that thin line. Thin line between spoileritos and summaries. First things first, Faerie Tale was published in 1988. I believe that is 88. Yep, first published in 1988 by Doubleday. And as such, yes, fair warning, folks who have never read this before, especially potentially younger members of the audience, because it was written to take place in the present time of the 80s, it is dated, especially when it comes to technology. There's references to computers running off floppy disks. And if you don't know what a floppy disk is, go research that after the video. And please don't let me know you needed to research that, because that just makes me feel old. I remember the days of the floppy disks. I'm not old, shut up! I'm still young in spirit. I'm good. So there you go. Good times. Now my copy's a little worn. Unfortunately, as you can see here, there was a little bit of an incident with some liquid during one of the several occasions I have read this book, so it is not in mint condition, which is sad for me. But it's okay. It is still, you can still read it. I actually just read it this past fall. So within the past year. Actually, within the past about 6 months. So, it is, I can still read the book, which is good news for me. Now, what is our story about? Besides the fairies. The book takes place in upstate rural New York. That is an odd word. Rural. Small town, farms, that type stuff. Rural. Upstate New York, where we meet Phil Hastings, a man who has made quite a name for himself along with a small fortune writing scripts for Hollywood movies. Although he did originally start out as a novelist, he kind of fell into the Hollywood scene, wrote a series of movies, made his money, but has decided that he is tired of the Hollywood scene and wishes to take his family with him to the small town in New York that he grew up in, wanting to get away from the hustle and bustle of movie land, and more specifically get back to writing novels, as he always enjoyed that more than writing films. As for his family, it is a bit of a mix-up reflecting the 80s and, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 20s that we have now. But the more modern image of the nuclear family in that his wife Gloria is actually his second wife. And the oldest child, who is his only daughter, and is from his first marriage. There are references throughout the book to his ex-wife and how the various drama surrounding the choices his ex-wife made throughout her life, including the ones that led to her marrying Phil Hastings and having her daughter, who is where is my notes? Gabby, Gabrielle, Gabby for short, as she's referred to in it, impacts the family today mostly through Gabby. But we have Phil's current wife Gloria and their two children, the twins Sean and Patrick. This is where we really get into your Irish connection. As is noted by the local small business mechanic / town drunk / Irish immigrant, Sean and Patrick are good old-fashioned Irish names. Yes, I will be doing horrible Irish accents throughout this review. I apologize to the country of Ireland for being so god-awful at impersonating your accents. But I can't help it. It's a nice accent. It sounds good. And when you get this deep into celebrating the culture, it just slips off the tongue. Yeah, I do what I can. I am who I am. But Sean and Patrick do have some Irish blood in them. And as they hang out at the farmland, interacting with the local boys, but more importantly, seeing the local legends, including a mound on their family property that some refer to as a Faerie Hill, as well as a creek with a small bridge over it that has long since been known to give those who cross it a little bit of a shiver and shudder. We begin seeing little hints that there is something truly magical in the woods that make up the Hastings' newly acquired property. we go through a wonderfully well-written, excellently paced, slow burn as all three children, in their own ways, experience little touches of the supernatural throughout their property, and we begin to understand that there is more than the regular reality existing at the Hastings farm. Gabby finds herself falling in love, but also being tempted by a man who may not technically be human. Sean and Patrick find themselves facing their childhood fears and superstitions of the unknown when the bad thing stalks them and attempts to attack them, but it has a master who is the true manipulator and whose schemes run pretty deep. A master who himself is bound by an ancient pact made with humans from the old world who may or may not still have descendants of their order hanging around in modern times. Our cast is rounded out with, besides the aforementioned mortal love for young Gabby, Phil Hastings' mentor and former college professor, who herself knows two local scholars who specialize in mythology and specifically separating fact from fiction, whose knowledge base may just be the key to revealing everything going on and how to deal with the fairies. Now I know what you're thinking. Okay, so the kids are getting harassed a little by a villain. How dark can this dark fantasy get? Well, for those of you who've never played with dark fantasy genre before, it can. As I said, these are the oldest iterations of the Celtic mythology that are being influenced through this work. As such, these are not cute, tiny little Tinkerbell fairies who just want to play games but may occasionally get short-tempered. As it is quoted at one point in the book, the true fairy are not really by human standards good or evil, because they are so culturally and physically different as beings that while they appear human by and large, their way of dealing with the world is so alien that you can't actually call what they do good or evil. But as such, whether they mean to or not, they will harm humanity. Especially those, like the Master and the Bad Thing, who would prefer not to have a peaceful pact with humanity. Now, we do cover the full breadth of the Celtic mythology, as well as a dash of modern occult. Again, don't want to spoil too much, but conspiracy, power groups operating in the shadows. As I said, the descendants of those who made the original pact may or may not still be around. If not direct descendants, those who know of the pact and would prefer to keep it because, having fairies being allowed to run loose in the world and do whatever they want to people, especially those who really see people as nuisances, that's not a good thing for humanity. But, as I said before, the issue here is, more importantly, even when the fairies are trying to be pleasant and simply play with people, their idea of play doesn't really mesh well with humanity and our mortal limitations, especially the physical limitations. I'm going to go ahead and warn people because, this is something that out of respect for what does happen in the real world, and that it is written in a very respectful but still real feeling way. There is a scene that is a very key scene. This is treated as a major important part of the story. It is not just done for the sake of shock value and moved on from. But there is a scene of sexual assault in the novel. And as such, that particular chapter, as I said, just fair warning to people, may be hard to read. You know. So I'm going to let that out there. I'm not putting out any judgments of whether stuff like this should be included in fiction, which is at its core designed to be entertainment. That is a huge can of worms we're not getting into. I'm just going to say, for those of you who are again, I'm trying to treat my language very carefully here. For those of you who have trouble reading fictionalized accounts of such events due to them being something that you may or may not have experienced in your life, please be warned. So, with that being said, that, along with, as I said, very serious treatments of the fact that there is a bad thing that is attacking two young brothers, that there is some, as many of the old Celtic tales went, issues of kidnapping, just the very idea that the fairies' presence can psychologically overwhelm a human who is not pre-prepared his mind to accept the concept of such beings existing. I mean, this is all stuff that is told in the old stories and is told in the book. There's multiple points in the book where, especially if you've never read it or have gone so long without reading it that on a reread you've forgotten about a lot of these details, you may have to stop and put the book down for a second and go, wow, that was intense. That was kind of frightening. I think I want to turn another light on before I continue reading this. It is at its heart a fantasy story, but it is so creepy and so realistic in its depictions of how psychologically dealing with stuff that is not part of the everyday, and for many people is something that we deny can exist, period, in our modern world of technology and rationality, can mess with your head. So, on that, I give huge props. Huge! Look at how huge that is. So huge we messed up our focus. Huge props to Raymond E. Feist for being able to bring a story like this to life in a way that feels very real, but at the same time feels like a world we know we're never going to personally experience. Because, I don't know about you, but I've never seen a fairy. I have never been tempted by a seductress of the supernatural. I've never been threatened by a bad thing. So, yes, it is a world that you're not going to experience, but it's so close to reality. It's just right next door. You could reach out and touch it. That it will leave you with a little bit of the creeps. And that is a great thing. That is a testament to the talents of the author. Outside of this, as I said, I really can't tell you more about the book without causing specific spoilers, except to say that if you've never really read up on Celtic mythology, the exposition pieces here, the story of the rituals you need to do to protect yourself from them, the descriptions of the fairies and their behavior, not just around humans but with each other. It's a wonderful section about the fairy court and internal politics that has an important impact on the story and especially its conclusion. That, when it's all said and done, if you're not familiar with the mythology, you'll get a great base to start from. And if you are, well, you may see some of it coming, or you may learn a couple things you didn't already know before. Either way, you will have respect for the Celtic, Gaelic, whichever preferred nomenclature or precise nomenclature should be used to refer to this mythology. I admit I myself am not a high professor expert on the terminology, so either way, I adore the book. It's one of those I like to read every few years. Go look it up. It's probably going to have a different illustration cover. As I said, I've had this copy for several years, if not longer, probably longer than several. I don't know. Do we have a publishing date on this edition? The original copyright, and the cover art copyright was the '89 edition paperback printing. But I don't think this particular one was printed as far back as that, because I definitely didn't buy it that far back. This edition contains complete text of the original hardcover edition. Okay, I don't have a specific printing date for this edition, but I purchased it in the late 90s, early 2000s, so we're going to have to go from there, folks. Either way, the book was around for quite a while before I first read it. It's definitely still floating around the internet, so please check it out. As I said, you're probably going to get updated cover art edition. I can't promise that you'll have this awesome cover art. One more time, look at that. That's the information you need. Go look it up if any of this sounds like it's interesting to you. Personally, I highly recommend the book. It'll be a great treat for March. Really get you hyped for more stories of mischievous wee folk. It's not just the leprechauns that are hanging around either. Nope, it's a lot more. So dive deep into it. Enjoy a tale of a modern family meeting the ancient world. And more importantly, come back in 7 days, because we got more to come, because March isn't over. And that means more green scene. That's how we celebrate. I'm here every week. I'm going to ramble. And more importantly, I'm always going to promise we're not going to be negative hatred just for the sake of being angry and ranty. We ramble, we do not rant. So enjoy the holidays. Enjoy this lovely note of positivity in your entertainment expositions. And remember, feel free to drop any suggestions for something you'd like me to talk about, give my personal take on, or even just something to recommend for me to read in my own spare time. Because we're always open to comments and commentary. We are Roulette Productions. We appreciate everybody who gives us a shot. And tell all your friends, because the more the merrier. We are here for entertainment. We are here to party. And this whole month is all about celebration. Fun on March. Get your green on, 'cause we ain't done yet by far. Bye-bye, folks.